Public humiliation disguised as humor is one of the most socially acceptable forms of disrespect, which is why it is also one of the most dangerous. It often begins subtly, a sarcastic remark about your mistake, a story shared at your expense, a joke that targets your insecurity while everyone else laughs. On the surface, it looks harmless. The person may even smile and say they are just kidding. But the real question is not whether they are joking. The real question is who benefits from the joke. Humor in healthy relationships builds connection and mutual enjoyment. It does not isolate one person as the consistent target. When someone repeatedly uses you as the punchline, especially in front of others, they are lowering your status in that social environment. Social groups operate on perception. If people see you being mocked without resistance, they unconsciously rank you lower. The issue is not sensitivity, it is positioning. Respectful people are aware of how their words affect the room. They protect your dignity, especially in public. When someone does the opposite, it signals either carelessness or control. Neither should be ignored. The pattern matters more than the individual comment. Anyone can misjudge a joke once, but repetition reveals intent. If you calmly express discomfort and the behavior continues, that is no longer humor. That is a boundary test. Some individuals use teasing to measure how much they can get away with. If you laugh it off every time, you silently communicate that your limits are flexible. Over time, the jokes often escalate. What began as light teasing becomes sharper, more personal, more frequent. The psychological effect is gradual erosion of confidence. You may begin anticipating the next remark, monitoring your behavior to avoid becoming material for ridicule. That is a shift in power. The solution is not aggression, it is clarity. A composed response such as, "I do not find that funny," delivered without apology, resets the dynamic. It signals awareness. If the person values the relationship, they will adjust. If they respond with defensiveness or increased mockery, they reveal their priorities. You are not responsible for managing someone else's discomfort when you protect your dignity. Public respect requires private standards. When you refuse to participate in your own humiliation, others quickly learn that your presence comes with boundaries. Consistent dismissal of your thoughts and opinions is a quiet form of disrespect that often goes unnoticed at first. It does not come with raised voices or open conflict. Instead, it appears as interruptions, distracted responses, subtle eye rolls, or a quick change of subject when you begin to speak. You share an idea in a meeting and it is ignored, only to be praised when repeated by someone else. You express a concern and are told you are overthinking. Over time, this pattern sends a clear message. Your perspective does not carry weight here. Human communication is not only about words, it is about attention. Where attention goes, value is assigned. When someone consistently withholds attention from your input, they are assigning you lower importance. This erodes confidence gradually. You may begin shortening your explanations, softening your statements, or deciding it is easier to stay silent. That is the psychological cost. Respectful individuals do not have to agree with you, but they acknowledge your contribution. They respond directly. They engage. Disagreement can coexist with respect. Dismissal cannot. The danger of this behavior lies in repetition. One distracted moment can be accidental. A consistent pattern is intentional or at least tolerated. When your voice is regularly minimized, the dynamic becomes unbalanced. You start adapting to their comfort rather than expressing your clarity. The solution is not to speak louder or argue harder. It is to calmly reclaim space. When interrupted, continue your sentence without apology. When your idea is overlooked, restate it with composure. If someone attributes your point to another person, correct it directly and without hostility. These responses are not confrontational. They are corrective. They signal that you are aware of the dynamic and unwilling to shrink within it. If the dismissal continues after you assert yourself respectfully, you are receiving important information about how you are valued. Not every environment deserves your full contribution. Your thoughts are extensions of your experience and reasoning. When someone repeatedly dismisses them, they are not debating you. They are devaluing you. Protecting your voice does not not require aggression, it requires consistency. When you treat your perspective as worthy of attention, others either adjust or remove themselves. Both outcomes restore balance. Boundary violations after clear communication are among the most revealing forms of disrespect because they show exactly how much someone values your limits. Everyone makes mistakes or misreads signals from time to time. But once you have clearly expressed a boundary, whether emotional, physical, or psychological, and someone continues to push against it, they are not confused. They are testing you. A person who respects you listens when you clarify what is acceptable and what is not. They may ask questions, seek to understand, or adjust their behavior. A person who does not respect you will pretend not to understand, laugh it off, or turn your boundary into a personal inconvenience. When this happens repeatedly, it is no longer a communication issue. It is a control issue. Boundaries are not threats. They are instructions for how to stay in your life without causing damage. When someone repeatedly crosses that line, what they are saying is, "I hear you, but what I want matters more." This kind of disrespect is subtle but destructive. It trains you to second-guess your standards. You start wondering if you were too rigid, too sensitive, too serious. Over time, you may begin adjusting your own limits to keep the peace. That is exactly what boundary violators count on. Your silence, your flexibility, your willingness to avoid confrontation. But every time you stay silent after your limit is ignored, you teach that person that your words carry no weight. And what happens next? The boundaries continue to move. The behavior becomes more invasive. The excuses become more sophisticated, and you become less secure in your own space. The solution is to let your actions speak. If someone crosses a line you have already defined, you do not need to yell, argue, or repeat yourself a third time. You simply respond with behavior. That could mean stepping away from the conversation, taking space from the person, or reevaluating their role in your life. Respect is not only about how people treat you when you speak, it is about how they behave after you have spoken. Clarity is your best defense. When you set a boundary, make it calm, direct, and specific. Avoid emotional outbursts. Emotion gives manipulators room to turn the issue around on you. Precision leaves no space for confusion. If the person responds with blame, sarcasm, or pressure, take note. They are not listening. They are negotiating, and your dignity is not a negotiation. The people who belong in your life will not need multiple reminders to honor your standards, and those who do are not forgetting. They are choosing. When you enforce boundaries with consistency and composure, you protect your peace and strengthen your presence. You do not need to explain your standards repeatedly to be taken seriously. You just need to live by them. Manipulation through guilt, silence, or subtle intimidation is a refined form of disrespect because it hides behind emotion rather than confrontation. It does not look aggressive on the surface. Instead, it feels heavy. You make a decision that is right for you, and suddenly, the other person becomes distant, disappointed, or dramatically hurt. They may remind you of everything they have done for you. They may say they just thought you cared more. The message beneath the words is clear. Your independence is costing them control. Guilt is often used as a leash. When someone cannot command your behavior directly, they attempt to influence it indirectly by attaching emotional consequences to your choices. Over time, this conditions you to prioritize their comfort over your clarity. You begin adjusting decisions not because they are wrong, but because you want to avoid the emotional fallout. That is not harmony. That is pressure. Silence can also become a weapon. Healthy space is respectful and mutual. Manipulative silence is strategic and punitive. It appears after disagreement or boundary setting. Communication stops. Energy shifts. You are left wondering what you did wrong. The goal is not resolution. The goal is to make you uncomfortable enough to chase repair, even when you were not at fault. Subtle intimidation works similarly. It is not loud or obvious. It might be a change in tone, a stare held slightly too long, a reminder of influence or authority. These signals are designed to create hesitation. The common thread in all of these behaviors is control without accountability. The person does not openly demand obedience. They shape your environment so that obedience feels like the easiest option. That is the psychological trap. The solution is awareness combined with composure. When guilt is used against you, separate facts from emotion. Ask yourself whether your decision violated a principle or simply disrupted someone's preference. When silence is used to punish, resist the urge to chase validation. Calmly maintain your position. When intimidation appears, slow your response rather than speed it up. Manipulation loses power when it does not trigger reaction. You do not need to confront every tactic aggressively. You need to refuse to internalize it. Respect allows room for disagreement without emotional coercion. If someone requires you to feel guilty, anxious, or small in order to stay connected to them, that connection is conditional. And conditional respect is not respect at all. Protect your emotional autonomy with steady behavior. The moment manipulation stops working, its appeal fades. Gaslighting is one of the most damaging forms of disrespect because it targets your perception rather than your position. It does not attack you openly. It slowly reshapes how you interpret reality. It begins with small denials. You recall a conversation clearly, and the other person insists it never happened. You remember their words, and they tell you that you misunderstood. When you react to something hurtful, they describe you as overly sensitive or unstable. At first, these moments seem minor, but repetition changes their impact. When your experiences are consistently questioned, you begin to question yourself. Memory becomes uncertain. Judgment feels unreliable. That uncertainty creates dependence. If you cannot trust your own interpretation, you start leaning on the very person who is distorting it. That is the mechanism. Gaslighting shifts authority over reality from you to them. Respect does the opposite. Respect encourages clarity, even during disagreement. The power of gaslighting lies in confusion. It creates emotional fog. Instead of addressing the original issue, the conversation shifts to your reaction. You try to defend your tone instead of discussing their behavior. The focus moves from what happened to whether you are imagining things. Over time, this pattern weakens confidence. You may start documenting conversations in your mind. You may hesitate before expressing concern, anticipating dismissal. The internal dialogue becomes exhausting. This is not healthy conflict. Healthy conflict involves two people debating facts and perspectives openly. Gaslighting replaces discussion with distortion. It is not about winning an argument. It is about maintaining control over the narrative. When someone consistently reframes events to protect themselves and discredit your experience, they are not misunderstanding you. They are protecting their position. The solution begins with grounding yourself in observable facts. Pay attention to patterns rather than isolated incidents. If you consistently leave interactions feeling confused or doubting clear memories, that pattern matters. You do not need dramatic confrontation. You need internal stability. Calmly state what you experienced without over-explaining. If the distortion continues, limit how much emotional weight you place on their interpretation. Seek perspectives from trusted neutral sources if necessary. Gaslighting only works when isolation takes hold. The goal is not to prove them wrong in every exchange. The goal is to preserve your clarity. Your perception is shaped by your experience, and it deserves respect. When someone repeatedly attempts to rewrite your reality, they are showing you how they maintain control. Protecting your mental clarity is not stubbornness. It is self-preservation. Conditional respect is a subtle but powerful form of disrespect because it appears positive on the surface. Everything feels supportive when you are succeeding, producing, or providing value. You receive attention, praise, and cooperation. But the moment you struggle, set a boundary, or no longer serve a purpose, the tone shifts. Responses become colder. Support becomes scarce. The warmth you once experienced feels distant. This reveals an important truth. The respect was never about you as a person. It was about what you contributed. When respect depends on performance, it becomes a transaction. Transactions are not relationships. They are exchanges. In healthy dynamics, your worth is not tied to constant output. You are allowed to have difficult seasons without losing basic consideration. Conditional respect, however, operates like a contract with hidden terms. As long as you deliver, you are valued. The moment you pause or prioritize yourself, the agreement is withdrawn. This pattern is common in competitive environments, social hierarchies, and even personal relationships. Someone may treat you differently based on your current status, influence, or usefulness. They may show enthusiasm when you are aligned with their goals and indifference when you are not. Over time, this creates pressure to maintain an image. You may feel compelled to overperform just to preserve connection. That pressure can quietly distort your behavior. Instead of acting from authenticity, you begin acting from maintenance. You manage perception rather than expressing truth. The psychological cost is significant. When approval becomes conditional, stability disappears. You start measuring your value by external reactions. That is not respect. That is dependency disguised as support. The response to conditional respect is not confrontation alone. It is awareness and recalibration. Observe how people behave when you are not at your peak. Notice who remains steady when you are unavailable, unsuccessful, or disagreeable. Those reactions reveal the foundation of the relationship. You do not need to accuse or dramatize. You simply adjust your investment accordingly. Give depth to those who demonstrate consistency. Offer distance to those who fluctuate based on convenience. Real respect is stable. It does not spike when you are useful and collapse when you are not. It allows you to be human without penalty. When you stop chasing approval and start valuing consistency, you shift the dynamic. You are no longer performing for acceptance. You are selecting for alignment. And that selection strengthens your position quietly but decisively. Passive-aggressive behavior is a refined form of disrespect because it avoids open conflict while still delivering hostility. It rarely announces itself directly. Instead, it shows up as sarcasm masked as politeness, delayed responses meant to inconvenience, subtle digs framed as concern, or compliance delivered with visible resentment. On the surface, everything appears civil. Beneath the surface, there is resistance. The difficulty with passive aggression is that it creates plausible deniability. When you address it, the other person can respond with, "I was only joking," or "You are reading too much into it." This shifts the focus onto your perception rather than their behavior. Over time, this pattern creates tension without resolution. You feel the friction, but you are given no direct issue to solve. That ambiguity is intentional. It allows the person to express dissatisfaction while avoiding accountability. Respectful communication is clear even when it is uncomfortable. Passive aggression replaces clarity with subtle punishment. This behavior often emerges in individuals who are uncomfortable with direct confrontation or fear losing control. Instead of stating disagreement openly, they leak it indirectly. For example, they may agree to a request but intentionally perform it poorly. They may avoid responding to important messages to signal disapproval. They may make backhanded compliments that lower your status while appearing supportive. The impact is cumulative. Each small act may seem minor, but together they create an unstable environment. You begin monitoring tone, reading between lines, and anticipating hidden meaning. That mental effort drains focus and confidence. The relationship becomes less about cooperation and more about interpretation. Passive aggression thrives in environments where direct feedback is avoided. It depends on your hesitation to call it out. The response requires composure and precision. When you notice passive-aggressive patterns, address the behavior directly and calmly. Instead of accusing, describe what you observe. For example, when you agreed but then did not follow through, it created confusion. This approach removes emotional charge and places attention on facts. If the person deflects or denies, remain steady. You do not need to prove intent. You only need to clarify impact. Consistency is key. When indirect hostility no longer produces reaction or advantage, it loses effectiveness. Respect is built on directness. It allows room for disagreement without hidden penalties. If someone consistently avoids honest dialogue and replaces it with subtle resistance, they are prioritizing comfort over clarity. You are not obligated to adapt to unspoken hostility. You are allowed to require straightforward communication as the standard for remaining engaged. Disregard for your time, effort, and commitments is one of the clearest indicators of disrespect because time is the one resource that cannot be replaced. When someone repeatedly arrives late without acknowledgement, cancels plans at the last moment without concern, or ignores agreed deadlines, they are communicating a hierarchy of priorities. It is not about occasional emergencies. Everyone encounters unexpected disruptions. The issue is consistency. Patterns reveal values. If your schedule is treated as flexible while theirs is treated as fixed, the imbalance becomes obvious. Over time, this behavior conditions you to accommodate them. You adjust your calendar, extend deadlines, and minimize inconvenience to keep things moving. But each adjustment reinforces a silent message that your time is less valuable. Respectful individuals understand that commitments represent trust. When they cannot honor an agreement, they communicate early and take responsibility. Disrespect avoids responsibility and expects tolerance. The psychological effect of repeated disregard is subtle but significant. You may begin lowering your expectations to avoid disappointment. You may stop holding people accountable because it feels easier than addressing the issue. That adaptation seems practical, but it slowly reduces your standards. When someone frequently interrupts your work, talks over your schedule, or assumes you are always available, they are shaping a dynamic where your boundaries are secondary. The danger is not only inconvenience, it is erosion of authority over your own time. If you allow repeated interruptions without correction, you signal that access to you requires no consideration. That perception spreads quickly in both professional and personal environments. People observe what behavior is accepted and adjust accordingly. The solution is clarity combined with enforcement. When someone misses a commitment, acknowledge it directly and calmly. Avoid emotional escalation. State the impact and restate the expectation. If lateness becomes routine, adjust your availability rather than absorbing the inconvenience. For example, begin meetings on time regardless of who arrives. If cancellations are frequent, limit how far in advance you schedule with that person. These responses are not punitive. They are corrective. They align behavior with consequence. Time reflects priorities. When someone consistently protects their own schedule while ignoring yours, believe the pattern. Respect for time demonstrates respect for you. When you guard your commitments with consistency, others learn that access to your attention is earned through reliability, not assumed through convenience. Enforcing standards and refusing to tolerate disrespect is a form of self-leadership that ultimately strengthens your relationships and your sense of self-worth. Many people believe that respect must be demanded loudly or aggressively, but true respect is established quietly, consistently, and deliberately. When you recognize patterns of disrespect, whether through public humiliation, dismissal of your ideas, boundary violations, manipulation, gaslighting, conditional respect, passive aggression, or disregard for your time, you are observing data. These are not personal failures. They are signals. They tell you how your presence is being perceived and treated. The response is not emotional reaction but measured action. By setting clear expectations and calmly enforcing boundaries, you communicate that your standards are non-negotiable. People may resist at first. That is natural. Change is uncomfortable for those accustomed to control or advantage. Your role is not to argue endlessly. Your role is to live by your principles and allow consequences to follow. Consistency is the greatest tool in enforcing standards. When someone crosses a line, your response must match the infraction. Overreacting diminishes your authority. Underreacting invites repetition. A calm, firm approach establishes clarity and sets precedent. For example, if someone dismisses your ideas in a meeting, you do not need to confront them angrily. You state your point, ensure it is understood, and refuse to shrink to appease their ego. If someone violates your boundaries after repeated reminders, adjusting access to them reinforces the value of your limits. If manipulation or gaslighting appears, protect your perception by documenting facts and maintaining emotional distance. Respect is not negotiated in chaos. It is earned through demonstration and maintained through consistency. Part of self-leadership is recognizing when disengagement is the only remaining option. Not every environment or person will adjust. That is not failure. That is data. Walking away from repeated disrespect is not weakness. It is prioritizing integrity over approval. People who value control or convenience more than your dignity will often resist, argue, or escalate. Your role is to maintain composure and remain aligned with your principles. Each act of boundary enforcement, clarity, and accountability strengthens your internal authority. You no longer rely on external validation to maintain self-respect. You create a standard of interaction that others must adapt to if they wish to remain part of your life. This approach reshapes dynamics quietly but powerfully. Respect does not require volume. It requires awareness, discipline, and consistent action. When you refuse to tolerate disrespect, you teach others how to treat you. You protect your mental, emotional, and social space while signaling that your value is non-negotiable. Over time, environments that once tolerated disrespect will either adapt or remove themselves, leaving you in the company of those who recognize your worth.